I do want to take a moment to introduce the great speakers we have coming up. The first speaker in the afternoon session will be Dr. Jeffrey Stringer. He is a James Brown Endowed Professor and Chair of the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources with the University of Kentucky. Dr. Stringer has conducted research and engaged in science delivery and technology transfer on high-quality timber production and best management practices for timber harvesting. He is director of the Kentucky Master Logger Program and Center for Forest and Wood Certification, and is most recently co-founder of the White Oak Initiative. Dr. Stringer is recognized nationally for his contribution to forestry, authoring more than 200 papers, videos, and other educational resources on upland hardwood management and operations. Second, we will hear from Mr. Bryan Alvey. He is the Senior Director of Governmental Affairs and External Affairs for the Kentucky Distillers Association. Mr. Alvey comes to the Kentucky Distillers Association from the Kentucky Farm Bureau Federation, where he was Director of Local Affairs and Policy Development. As Senior Director of Governmental and External Affairs for the Kentucky Distillers Association, Mr. Alvey is responsible for managing and directing the KDA's public affairs initiatives at all levels of government and internationally, while strengthening Kentucky's rightful title as the one true and authentic home for bourbon and distilled spirits. A native of Litchfield in Grayson, Kentucky, Mr. Alvey is a combat veteran who has served the United States in 3 wartime operations, earning a Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He retired from the military in 2009. Additionally, Zeb Weese is the Executive Director of the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. Zeb was appointed by Governor Matt Bevin as Director of Kentucky State Nature Preserves in November 2016. He is a graduate of the University of Kentucky with a BS in Zoology and a BA in American History, and an MS in Forestry and an MA in American History. Mr. Weese has a long career in managing habitat and conservation areas and has been an employee of the Commonwealth since 1997. He was previously the Program Director and Conservation Biologist of the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund. Prior to that, he was a naturalist and land manager for the Kentucky Department of Parks, Kentucky Department for Fish and Wildlife Resources, and Kentucky State Nature Preserves. He is a TWS Certified Wildlife Biologist, AFE Certified Fire Ecologist, Associate Editor of the Natural Areas Journal, founding member of the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council, and advisor to the Imperiled Bat Conservation Fund and Kentucky Natural Lands Trust. So let's give them a round of applause and welcome Dr. Jeffrey Stringer.
Thank you. I appreciate being able to come and speak this afternoon. And we've got some PowerPoints back up that we'll start with here, and hopefully everything works okay. And we're going to be talking about white oak, its sustainability, the sustainability of the resource itself, the economics associated with it, and ultimately what we're trying to do about some of that through the development of the White Oak Initiative. And there are some acknowledgments I'd like to make, because you're going to be seeing some data. I apologize, that's after lunch, I understand, but we'll keep it to a minimum. Some of that information was coming from the Kentucky Division of Forestry, and I want to recognize them. We'll talk a little bit more about the Cabinet's engagement in all this here at the end, but also the U.S. Forest Service and Kentucky Forest Industries Association. Okay, so let me show you some forest facts. I'm just going to let them flash up here, and you can look at them, dealing with both the presence of the forest and the economic contribution. And so half the state's forested. I think everybody probably in this audience knows that. $12 to $14 billion in direct economic contribution from the wood industry, okay, and the forest sector. You know, we have a lot of landowners. We've got over 400,000 landowners own all the forest, right? And 100,000 own 10 acres or more. So forests are an important part of both our society, you know, our environment, right, and our economics. So let's speak a little bit about oak, okay? 70% of the forests are classified oak. Many of you who deal with the forest understand that there are a lot of oaks out there, okay? Composed of both white oaks and red oaks, various number of species. Counts for over 60% of that economic contribution. So they're important, their presence is important in the forest and all that they do there. but also from an economic standpoint as well. And white oak right now currently commands a pretty high dollar value compared to the red oaks and many other species, with the exception of black walnut. And there's significant interest in white oak from a number of different industries. So if you take this is just a picture of a white oak tree that I kind of was able to take it. It had been in a heart left after harvesting. You can kind of see it easily. And all those different industries, can participate in this one tree, okay? In the very bottom of the tree, you are able to cut logs off of there that oftentimes can contribute or provide high-quality saw timber for lumber production, veneer, stave logs. Stave's the vertical piece in a barrel, right? So you produce barrels out of higher quality, lower logs. And if you move up the tree, you get the logs that will be used for railroad cross ties, things of that nature, cants, and then pulpwood and residues at the top. So every tree in it, if you will, has all these different components in it. Now, some of them aren't veneer trees and those kind of things, don't have a high quality at the bottom of it, but you get the general picture, right? So oak and white oak is really important to a wide variety of industries, including downstream industries in the case of the staves, and that's the distilling industry, okay? And that'll be talked a little bit more later on. But white oak not only produces wood, it also produces these things, okay? White oak has the most digestible acorn of any oak species. So it provides obvious food and the tree itself habitat for a number of wildlife species. So the great thing about working with white oak is it's important economically, okay? It's important as far as the forest system goes and keeping it healthy and all the benefits you get, that clean water and all that kind of stuff. And it's also a significant benefit to wildlife. So it is a species that we ought to be concerned about, not just from a timber perspective, but from a lot of other reasons as well, okay? So we'll talk a little bit about our white oak here. And you see a couple pictures there. And those are high-quality white oak trees that we cut down and you make barrels out of them or slice veneer out of them and all those kind of things. Currently, there's a lot of growing stock out there. We have a lot of white oak in the woods, okay? There's a lot of it there. The pile of logs you see there are stave logs getting to be ready to be made into staves and ultimately into barrels. And so we currently have a significant amount of growing stock, what we call growing stock, out there in our forest, and not just here in Kentucky, but region-wide as well. Then the question is, what about the future? Right? Is that going to hold up or not? Okay. And so this slide shows you, it kind of looks like a Christmas tree, so right, the red and the green. But this is growth and drain. Okay. Anywhere you see with a red dot there, so to speak, or a red area, that's an area where we are taking more white oak out than we are growing. Okay. Our forests are out there. They're growing every day. They grow about 150 board foot on average a year, right? So they're accumulating timber out there, but we're also extracting it. So some of it's due to land use change, right? So we got a subdivision in or whatever, but a lot of it, of course, is due to harvesting. So you see that there's growth and drain issues scattered throughout the range of white oak. So then the question is, how are we doing relative to producing more oak compared to what is being removed out of the system, whether it's being due to urban expansion or timber harvesting, okay? This is data is from the Kentucky Division of Forestry. This is a commodity shot at pricing of stave logs. So these are the logs ultimately going into barrels. And you can see the upward trend in pricing for those, which means there's an upward trend in demand, okay? And that slide is through 2018. We got 2019 data, and it's staying on an uphill rise. And that tells you there is demand, particularly from the distilling industry and the cooperage industry and all that, for more higher quality white oak. Okay. Now, high quality white oak is also used for flooring and lots of lumber production and all that kind of thing, and veneer as well. Okay. So hang with me on this. This is data in acres. So the height of the bar represents how many acres you have out there of different age classes of white oak dominated forest. Okay, all the way from 0 to 10, so young regenerating forest, right? The middle there is 61 to 70 years old. So the maximum acreage we have out there region-wide in white oak dominated forests is in the 60 to 70-year-old category. And if we can do this calculation for Kentucky. I tend to work with regional data because supply chains work regionally and don't stop the state line, that kind of thing. If we'd run this graph just for Kentucky, it'd look very similar to this, okay? So if you start thinking about sustainability long-term, and looking at this data, you can see there's a little bit of an issue because our forests age. Right now, those 61 to 70-year-olds saying 10 years from now, right, they're 70 to 80. 10 years after that, the 80, 90, et cetera, right? So this whole thing is moving, okay, and getting older, right, and moving to the right, okay? So if it does that, then what's going to take its place? Because only 18% of the acreage out there is 0 to 50 years old. That means 80% of it, right, is older than 50 years. Well, as that ages, what acreage do you have to take its place, okay? So if this is just the part of the curve that's 50 years older and up, right, and let's grow this 50 years. Let's move all those bars that you see there, make that one that's 51 to 60 years old, make it be 100 years old, right? So what's going to take its place? Well, it's this acreage right here. Now, how does that work? Well, it doesn't work very well, right? So we don't have enough of young acreage out there right now to take its place. Now, this looks very dire for a lot of reasons, because you have a projected volume change of a negative 77%. So when you talk about availability of the resource out there, right, for use by all our different industries, you have an issue. Now, it probably won't be this bad. This is the worst case scenario. It probably won't be that bad, okay? And the reason I say that is because that stuff that's now 51 to 60 years old, see, when it's 100 years old, it's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere, right? It's out there happening, but those are the age classes, though, that you are extracting timber from, okay? And eventually, it gets old and dies, okay? All right, so we know we have this inherent issue going on, okay? So why the loss of this age? Why aren't we regenerating our oak forest, okay? I mean, there's lots of reasons, right? And the biggest one is we have a lack of little bitty regeneration. Acorns fall to the ground, make a seedling, right? So we have a lack of that across the Kentucky and the region. And the reason that is because we have competing species like red maple for that growing space. I'm going to show you a picture in a minute that'll put a picture to this, and that sometimes works better, okay? And our harvests do not always promote, adequate regeneration of our oaks. So let me show you a picture, okay? So on the right, okay, you have a mature white oak forest. And you see that big tree in there, that's a white oak, okay? 80, 90, 100-foot tall, producing acorns, every other year, whatever, okay? But all the action of regeneration is down on the forest floor, okay? And for oak to be able to regenerate itself, meaning if we harvest that stand, right, or it blows down in a windstorm, right, is the new stuff going to come back in oak or not? That's what I'm talking about. Well, it requires small oak seedlings to be present on the forest floor, okay? Now, when you look at that picture, and you see the little seedling I'm talking about there on the left, if you look at the picture on the right, okay, if you cut that big white oak tree, you're saying, well, the next tree that's going to take its place is that one directly to the right, that smaller tree to the right. The problem is that's a hickory, not a white oak, okay? The leaves of all that stuff that's close to the ground, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 foot tall, that's like, well, the closest one's redbud, okay? There's no oak in that at all. The little bitty oak seedlings are down there on the forest floor being shaded out by all that red maple and other stuff above it, okay? And that's stopping its development, and eventually it stays small and it dies out. So we have competing species that are in our woods right now that are precluding the natural regeneration of our oak, okay? Pretty simple, okay? Now, you say, well, how do you fix this, okay? Well, the way you fix it is the use of scientifically based management and what we call like oak-friendly harvesting. So you got to do the practice right, and we know what those practices are. We have practice can be done, harvest can be done in a way that promotes oak, and we got to make sure that gets done. And that's where outfits like the Kentucky Division of Forestry come in. They provide the technical expertise, right, for landowners throughout the state to be able to have knowledge to be able to get that done, and the services to help them do that, okay? But we need to expand that region-wide, our ability to manage our forest, okay? So what's been our response to this issue? Well, one thing that's going on now, and I was been asked to speak about, is what's called the White Oak Initiative. Okay, so back in 2015 and 2017, we ran 2 White Oak Sustainability Conferences, mainly for industry, and that includes all the users of white oak and white oak dependent industries like cooperages, like distilling, all our normal forest industries, and we did that specifically to get this kind of detailed information, although a lot more detail than what I've showed here, but this kind of information in front of those industries that are dependent upon white oak. Okay, so they can understand and help plan for and deal with what's going on. So we ran those meetings, and there was an interest from that in developing a partnership to do something about this, okay? And it was, from that interest, we developed the White Oak, what's now the White Oak Initiative, and it was developed by myself and Tom Martin, who's president of the American Forest Foundation. That is the outfit that runs the American Tree Farm System, okay? And Brown Forman had a significant interest in it as well. And so we got together, we decided there was interest from Distillers, there's interest from an entity like American Tree Farm who has broad scope and whatever to deal with this problem, and we formed the initiative. And there are a lot of people I bought into that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it here in a second, okay? But the initiative is basically a partnering of university, and you see down there on the WHO, it's a partnering of landowners and practitioners, foresters, right? Forest industries and distillers and conservation organizations and et cetera, that are involved in TNC, for example, federal agency, all that are interested in White Oak, And the White Oak Initiative is all about ensuring or trying to develop, plans and actions that help the long-term sustainability of this species, both from an economic, social, and conservation benefit standpoint, And we're doing that through the development of this partnership, right, and coming up with mechanisms or actions to help us increase forest management out there, okay? And I think we're going to try this. Let's try to run this, and this is on the initiative.
A lot of different people, for a lot of different reasons, care about our white oak forests.
Numbers right now are showing that growing stock of younger oaks is declining.
That causes a long-term sustainability concern.
Because it's a slowly evolving issue, it's hard to bring often attention to it because it's not something that just happens overnight.
Because if it takes 50 or 80 or 100 years to grow this, you have to think about it now.
We've got a lot of middle-aged to older-age forests. What's missing is a lot of the younger.
40 to 50 years from now, we may have a tightening of supply.
That would really hurt a lot of industry.
There's a demand for higher quality white oak, for barrel production, for veneer, for lumber production, all those kind of things.
The challenge is landowners being aware of good management practices, loggers being aware of good logging practices.
That's what the White Oak Initiative is trying to address. Part of what the White Oak Initiative is doing is taking all of this wide variety of organizations coming together to say, how do we teach farmers, either private or public, to grow or maintain their forest?
What we do is step in and give them a leg up. As a result of that, allow the white oak to compete, grow larger, faster, and regenerate the site. Once we have adequate reproduction on the ground, then we can start thinking about our harvest.
To fix long-term forestry issues like we have here, it takes collaboration.
We're often working with clients on a multi-generational basis.
The oak regeneration that we've seen today, my grandchildren may end up harvesting that.
When forest land is managed well, it produces benefits not only to the owner of that land, but it produces benefits far beyond those boundaries that benefit the public at large.
This is where we get clean water from. This is where we get wildlife habitat. If we want to have all those things 50, 100 years from now, you have to manage this resource.
So by being foresightful and looking ahead, we now can enjoy the things that we so value from oak forests.
So that was a little bit of a video that was put together for the White Oak Initiative right there, and including, Brown Forman was a big part of it. That was Alex Alvarez. He's, if you didn't see it, he's VP of Global Production for them. And this, obviously, the sustainability of the white oak resource is important for them as well as it is for other distillers and makers of bourbon here in this state, okay? And so this is where I want to talk a little bit about the Kentucky Division of Forestry's role in all this, because they got an important one, okay? So we've started a bunch of projects that are involved around increasing the penetration of good practice, good forest management, right? which includes timber production, obviously, but also wildlife habitat, clean water, all those kind of things. One of the first things that we did is we got $2.3 million, and this was a 17-state project to develop white oak management guidelines, resources, and all those things region-wide, 17 states involved. Kentucky Division of Forestry was the leader in that, okay? We got together with them. We started this project in the south. It spread to the north above the Ohio River, right? And we got 17 states involved in it, and this would not have happened without the Division of Forestry. We also have the first region-wide white oak genetic project in the U.S., okay? And we're doing things, I've got 400K there. We have a project involved, and again, Kentucky Division of Forestry taking the lead in this, of helping to establish a white oak tree improvement program in genetics. We have another $600,000 that's gone along with this, private donations, for us to be able to actually sequence the genome of white oak, because the geneticists need that, right, for a lot of different reasons. So we've got really $1 million right now going into genetics, 400K in hard cash and in-kind and stuff. The U.S. Forest Service is involved in providing that as well. So Kentucky Division of Forestry playing a big role in all of this. We also had a number of our distillers working when they were putting the Farm Bill together to make sure that there was money in the Farm Bill to do good forest practice, right? So that was something I can't do at the university, right, without getting fired. And so we had our friends in these industries out there through the White Oak Initiative supporting those kind of things. And we've just, all of this has spurred the interest in submitting a $10 million region-wide research and education proposal to USDA. So we have a lot of action around this white oak thing, you know. The cabinet is a big part of that and couldn't do it without it. And we look for good things to move forward. If you want to get more information on it, you've got a website, of course. Everybody's got a website, whiteoakinitiative.org, and you can contact others. Pamela Snyder with the Division of Forestry, you can email James and he'll staff it to somebody, right? Or you can contact me. But I'd suggest go to the website, and that's the best way to get more information on this. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for having me today, and I appreciate being here. I'd like to specifically thank Paulette and Secretary Snavely. I've worked extensively with his cabinet and his division since I've been on the job, and we really appreciate the level of cooperation that we have between our industry and the cabinet. Dr. Stringer did, I'm going to ask that my PowerPoint be put up here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, Dr. Stringer did a great job of talking about the White Oak Initiative, our involvement in it, and those types of things. I'm going to speak more on our industry. I'm going to highlight a few of the environmental initiatives that we've taken part in, and also just a little bit about the White Oak Initiative. But I wanted to draw your attention, while lunch was going on, I came in while Secretary Snavely was talking, and one of these caught my eye. It's the Sustainable Spirit Study that we and the Office of Compliance Assistance teamed up to and still work on. And it really highlights what our industry is doing with all sorts of sustainability, not just forestry, but a lot of different environmental initiatives that we take place in and participate in. So thanks again for letting me be here. I want to first just talk about, a lot of people in this room probably know about bourbon, know what we do, know that recently we've really grown. We've really, bourbon's taken off again. I think people appreciate, and a lot of people ask why, and I glean a lot of that information from our members because I'm newer to the job, a couple of years in. But one of the reasons I think is because part of it's just as simple as people are really taking the time to drink it the way they're supposed to. And when I say that, when you're at a tasting, you may have somebody say, well, you might want to try it this way, kind of diffuse the alcohol and then taste it. For years and years, people used to just shoot it down. Well, all you do is just taste the alcohol. So I think people have an appreciation for it. I think the quality is really good right now. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of different things with bourbon right now. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do, who we are, and all those types of things. So hopefully if you've seen this presentation before, you can bear it one more time. So we were founded in 1880, and our mission statement is passionately and responsibly unite, promote, protect, and elevate Kentucky's signature bourbon and distilled spirits industry. We've been around longer than the Statue of Liberty, the Eiffel Tower, or the invention of the zipper. So we've been around for a while. 9 years ago, we had 6 members in the KDA. And as you all have seen probably in some of your home areas, we have craft distillers now, other distillers that are expanding. So we're roughly 40 now. Sometimes, we'll have, there are a lot more licenses that have been applied for, so there's a lot more distilleries on the way, and a lot of times as those distilleries get up and running, that's when they'll become a member of ours. Initially, while they're trying to get their distillery going, sometimes this is an exception to the rule, but most of the time, once they get their distillery going is when they become a member. However, some people join right away, so I don't want to say that they don't join. Well, here's some that, and some of these are probably Preservation's already up and running, Castle and Key's already up and running. So there's several that are up and running. James Pepper's already a member of ours. So there's a lot more activity going on in the bourbon industry. Kentucky's the 95%. What does that mean? We make, right now, we supply roughly 95% of the world's bourbon. 100% of the good bourbon, but 95% of the total bourbon. So, but I will say there are states that are nipping at our heels to get into that monopoly, if you will, that 95% there. As it ages, some of that bourbon is, as bad as I hate to say it, sometimes tastier than it is and it has been. So that's something that we really want to hold on to, but we want to hold on to our quality more than anything. Here's just a few facts. I'm not going to read all this, but this is just some of the stuff that we have and the production levels that we have right now. Take, for example, 7.5 million barrels of bourbon gently aging in Kentucky. That's the highest since '72, and 8.1 million barrels of all spirits that are under roof right now. So I like to say if the zombie apocalypse were to happen, you're not in a bad place. This is, we'll go down fighting, but we'll go down happy. So this is something I feel like I have to point out too, because it is an integral part of our industry. It's not our favorite part by any means, but we are by far the heaviest, and I'm talking about the bourbon and spirits industry. We are by far the heaviest taxed industry in the state. Signature industry, but by far the heaviest taxed industry. And we're not here looking for, necessarily tax cuts or anything like that, but we definitely are always on the lookout for anything extra being put on us. So 60%, if you go to Prospect Party Center, that's one over there by close to where I live, that bottle of bourbon that you're buying, 60% of that is taxes, state and federal taxes. 35% of it's state taxes. So that just kind of shows a perspective of how much tax is on each bottle. I want to highlight just a minute. I want to talk about a few of the environmental initiatives that we have, that we participate in, sometimes that we spearhead. Obviously, the White Oak Initiative is something that's very near and dear to our heart, White Oak. Some of those slides, when our folks see them, Dr. Stringer, my first annual meeting with KDA, gave a presentation, and I was like, wow, it really gets your attention in this industry about the white oak, the need for the white oak, but the young white oak that we hope people are going to start taking more initiative and that it'll be around for a long time for the grandkids to make barrels and the grandkids to run the cooperages. We performed an environmental benchmarking study. I'll read a little bit of this. that talks about our collective energy and water use ratios, and that we have declined in those two areas. From 13 to 17 was the last time we did that benchmarking. Initiated a partnership with the Watershed Watch Kentucky. Many of you all are familiar with Watershed Watch. Supported the creation of the White Oak Initiative, and Allie in our shop works very closely with Dr. Stringer and others in the White Oak Initiative, and we're doing everything we can to support that and bring that to people's attention. We provided a forum for emerging outlets and technologies that recycle and reuse spent grains. There's probably several in this room that know spent grains is a big issue for us. You know, our production levels are up, and the popularity of bourbon has never been greater. And at the same time, couple that with the dairy industry, in all intents and purposes, leaving the state. So we're looking, and we're working with the Department of Compliance and Assistance, and with several in the cabinet, to look for innovative ways. And we're also looking at, as you might imagine, outside investors, outside corporations, outside companies to come in and utilize that. There is value in that. Sometimes it takes a lot of energy to get it to the point where the value is there, but we're looking at anything and everything as a means to help us with that. And then, as I've said, collaborate with the Compliance Assistance to host the annual Sustainable Spirits Summit. We're a proud member of the Energy Environment Cabinet's Kentucky Excel program. We focus on the natural resources that go into distillery products, basically wood, water, and grains. You know, that's a big focus for us, and we do all that we can, and we're continue to doing more to be a sustainable industry and be proud of what we do in that area. We're leading the way in some of these areas. Individually, some of the distilleries have received the Cabinet's DEP Award, and in 2018, Maker's Mark hired its first environmental champion, Jason Nally. You all may know Jason. And then in 2019, and this is a big initiative that we're really working on, and we're actively going out to universities to say, hey, will you participate in this? And we've had great success and great enthusiasm from the university when we go out and talk about the James Beam Distilling Institute at UK, and that is to work and help tackle those environmental sustainability projects and strengthen technical education for the industry's workforce. As you know, or I shouldn't say as you know, as you may know, we have a big workforce problem ourselves, as many industries do, but where we kind of miss out some is in the area of having to wait till students and graduating students and college students are 21 before they can really work in our industry. So we're missing out on that 3-year age gap there between 18 and 21, and we're looking for ways that we can help our workforce be a productive workforce, an educated workforce, but still have a workforce. Excuse me. I want to highlight just a little bit our W9 Summit of Collaboration. We hosted for the first time ever the world's whiskey. 9 whiskey associations came together in Louisville. And we were proud that, you know, we're just a state association, but we were proud that we were able to get all those world whiskey associations out here to talk about a number of things. Environmental sustainability is one. Obviously, tariffs are a big issue for us, and that was the main purpose of the collaboration. But we're planning a white oak over on my right. It'd be your right too. The white oak right there down in front of the Fraser History Museum as a symbol of that sustainability and the collaboration that we shared. So just want to touch base on, let you all see that. Put your money where your mash is. Over $2.3 billion in capital investments between 2011 and 2021. A lot of that's been done, but a lot more is coming. We're doing a lot of stuff with visitor centers, with visitor experiences, and those types of things. Doesn't really relate to environmental per se. However, a lot of those visitor center, we do it with environmental sustainability in mind. So you'll see more environmental friendly, less energy use in some of those visitor centers and other parts of our experiences. I want to talk about the Bourbon Trail. You all probably heard of it. It is it's very successful. We also have a Bourbon Trail craft tour, which you may not be familiar with, but that is our smaller distilleries on the craft tour, and we really have a wide span. We go from Hopkinsville all the way to Pikeville with distilleries now. Actually, Paducah has distilleries, but on the craft tour, we have from Hopkinsville is really where it starts. And last year we had over 300,000 people visit the craft tour. We had record-breaking growth in 2018. You can see the total there. We had over 1 million on the Bourbon Trail and 340,000 on the craft tour. All-time high of 26 participating distilleries. A lot of people ask, are all the distilleries on the craft tour or on the Bourbon Trail or craft tour? No, but they're coming on quicker. So like I said, we have 40 members and 26 of them currently on the tours, and 314% growth in the last 2 years. So there's our number that we're proud of, that we like to talk about a lot. Over 1.4 million visits in 18. We don't have 19 numbers obviously yet. This just talks about a little bit about the tourists that are coming. I always like to say, when you bring out-of-state and out-of-country tourists into your community, it's really, the money is, I almost like to say, is free money, because they're bringing it into your restaurants, hotels, obviously the distilleries and other places, and they're not really taking anything out. They're not taking taxpayer-funded infrastructure out. They're not really using libraries or parks or anything like that. So it's kind of free money coming in, and we always like to talk about that to communities, because it really helps illustrate what's coming in. A lot of people that come to the Bourbon Trail are affluent, and they tend to spend a lot of money. So that's something else that really helps the communities out that support those distilleries. Just some other facts there. 86% of our out-of-state visitors drove to a distillery. I always thought that was a big number. You know, it's more of a driving destination. And a lot of times, obviously, if you're coming from Ohio and you're going to Florida, spend a couple of days on the Bourbon Trail, and a lot of people do that. This was, some of these are already, Old Forester's already up and running. Michter's, Luxero, OZ Tyler now has their visitor center up and running. And then Bardstown Bourbon Company just had their announcement of their new visitor center last week. In Jeb DeCreed, obviously, many of you all passed Jeb DeCreed. Want to talk a little bit about responsibility and the commitment that we have towards responsibility. You know, the legislature and the state and the governor's office have really supported our industry over the last several years with a number of initiatives that's really taken us to the forefront, really making that experience on the Bourbon Trail spectacular. With that, we always have promised we'll do it responsibly. And last year, our number one initiative in the General Assembly was a responsibility bill that really kind of ratcheted down and toughened DUI laws. So we take this responsibility seriously, and we want everybody to know it. Safe Rides Kentucky, a lot of different holidays will supply $10,000, $20,000 worth of safe and sober rides. I always like to use the example of the Georgia-UK game. We just did that as kind of an afterthought. We knew there would probably be a lot of consumption at that game. Kentucky was doing good. Georgia had a great team. We did about 400 rides an hour during the span of that game. You know, a lot of it was kind of bunched towards the end, but that's what it averaged out to. And so we're really proud of Safe Ride Kentucky. We give $10 and $20 vouchers for Lyft to take you home, so you don't ever, at least on those major holidays in certain areas, you don't have to drive home. Underage drinking, obviously, that's something that we use IntelliCheck for. You've probably been on the Bourbon Trail, and if you have, you know that we use that. So that was a lot of the good news that we're doing, and I've mentioned some of this, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much. This was from 2015. 5 years from now, the best bourbon in the U.S. will probably be from somewhere besides Kentucky. Well, we don't think so. It's time for Kentucky Bourbon to move over and follow our lead. That's something else we don't plan on doing anytime soon. That's from the Tennessee Distillers Guild, and that was a quote that he had. Again, we don't plan on doing anything that would tarnish our rightful place as a signature industry and the signature spirit that we are in the state. I will say, though, there are states that are catching up with us with the number of distilleries. Right now, we're 13th. That's actually outdated. We got some information yesterday, crunched some numbers yesterday, and we're ranked 13th. But here's the thing. We're okay with that as long as the quality's there. You know, it's all about the quality. Really, the number is not the important part. There are a number of states that are kind of outpacing us a little bit on getting rid of some Prohibition-era laws and stuff, but we're going to continue to work on that. We're going to do it safely and responsibly, but we also want to try to break down some of those, take some of the red tape out of the way. I'm sure you all can appreciate that for our distilleries. Bourbon Without Borders, House Bill 400 we passed in 2018. That is where we're going to be able to ship, and I say we're going to be able. Right now, the law says we can with states that are reciprocal, and we think that the common carriers are they're about ready to start doing that. Our distilleries and our visitor centers have been really chomping at the bit, but they wanted to get everything done right, the I's dotted and the T's crossed, to make sure their compliance people felt comfortable with shipping spirits. I do think that we're there, at least with UPS. I think we're there, and so I think that will start happening soon. Share the spirit. We're kind of going out to states when we can, to different places, and saying, hey, if you want us to ship to you, you have to allow us to ship to you, and we have to allow you to ship to us. We're just kind of letting it be known, getting the word out to ways that they could do that. This is just something that we talk about, different issues that we face. I've already talked about taxes and Prohibition-era laws. Parity is a big one for us. We preach parity. In other words, with wine and beer, we just want to be able to do what everybody else is able to do. And that way it keeps it competitive. And again, us being a signature industry, I should say this. We just surpassed the $1 billion payroll mark for our last economic development study, and we employ nearly, us and our secondary and ancillary companies employ almost 21,000 people. So that's why we think parity is such an important part, and we always preach that when we talk to the legislature or Congress. And we always say, enjoy your fine bourbon and distilled spirits like a true Kentuckian, and do it responsibly. Thank you.
All right, so while they're pulling up my PowerPoint, I'll tell you that the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves also works in the forest, a little bit different context. In fact, earlier this week, I was at our Blanton Forest State Nature Preserve in Harlan County, and I lost my glasses. So when I walk off the end of this stage and fall down, it is not bourbon related in any way, I assure you. What we're going to do is talk just a little bit about a wide variety of the programs that we work with. We were formed just last year, technically speaking. Secretary Snavely referred to it at lunch. We were a result of the merger of several long-standing cabinet programs: the State Nature Preserve System, the Wild River System, Heritage Land Program, and the Rare Plant Program that have been around for about 40 years. And there was a lot of overlap in those programs, and we figured there's some synergy there, and so we combined them. Fortunately, because I don't have my glasses, I'm not going to read all this stuff to you, but it more or less says what I just said. We have a variety of duties, but they all really kind of boil down to one thing, and that is, this is what we think Kentucky looked like when Daniel Boone got here. A lot of wetlands out west, more extensive prairies through the E-Town, Bowling Green, and West area than a lot of people realize, open woodlands in the middle of the state, and forests in the eastern part of the state, and this is what Kentucky looks like now. So there's been a lot of changes, obviously. Our responsibility is trying to find those little small pockets where kind of pre-settlement ecology still exists. And the way we do that is through our biological assessment and inventory process. We have botanists and zoologists that do habitat modeling, have a good idea of where the odds are that rare species will exist, and goes out and looks for them, does inventory work. Our zoologists particularly work with a wide variety of agencies. Our aquatic zoologists work with Division of Water quite frequently. Our folks working on critters like endangered bats or insects work quite a bit with State Fish and Wildlife. But the thing that we really do that kind of is unique to our program is, again, the rare plant program. Kentucky has about half a dozen federally listed plants and a few more that are considered at risk, which means they have been petitioned for listing and could potentially be federally listed at some point. We are the Section 6 cooperator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the state of Kentucky for endangered plants, which means it's our job to go out and find those populations and follow the recovery plan to recover them. We've had some success lately doing that. 2016, our efforts working with the Forest Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife got one of those plants, white-haired goldenrod, delisted. And that's a pretty complicated process. It took about 30 years or so of annual inventories, going out to rock shelters in the Red River Gorge, which is actually a pretty sweet gig. But nonetheless, we had to go and count individual stems of that plant to the point where we could prove that the populations of that plant were stable or even expanding in certain areas. They were actually recovering. So the way to get something delisted is to ensure that you got enough of it that it's not going to go extinct. That's really, it sounds simple, but it's very time-consuming and labor-intensive, but that's the only way to get something recovered. And, you know, when you talk about endangered species, I think some people kind of feel like endangered means it can't be recovered, or endangered is it's on its last legs. What it means is if you don't do something to recover it, it's on its last legs. So we implement a recovery plan to, again, to boost those populations to make sure it does not go extinct. That's our ultimate goal. And in addition to white-haired goldenrod, just a couple weeks ago, running buffalo clover, which has been federally listed for a few decades, was on the Federal Register to become delisted. Hopefully in late 2020 is on target for that. And running buffalo clover is found in Kentucky from around the Richmond area up through northern Kentucky. And it's getting delisted primarily just because we have found existing populations and protected them to some extent. But we have, through just searching for it, we found they were much more common. There was much more of them than previously thought. There are two other species down there at the bottom, water stitchwort, which is in central Kentucky, and rockcastle lasser, which is more in the Rockcastle River, Big South Fork area, that were petitioned for federal listing recently. An environmental organization thought they deserved to be endangered and filed suit to have them added to the list. And through our efforts and the efforts of our partnering agencies in Pennsylvania and Tennessee and other states, we showed that we actually had enough data to show the populations were stable and did not warrant listing. So just having data, just having folks that know what they're doing, going out and finding populations of these species is extremely valuable. And we do that all over the state. We have about 200, actually it's about 300 species on our state plant list. That has no legal protection. It doesn't inhibit any kind of development or anything like that. It's a watch list, and it lets us know that those are the plants that we think we should keep an eye out for, and we should begin to track those populations. That way, when something like water stitchwort or the rockcastle aster is petitioned, we already have data. We can already are ahead of the game and can show what we know about those plant populations. When we have that data, we don't just sit on it. It goes into a database that we keep, share with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and for development projects, for consulting firms or anybody doing any kind of project that really has environmental impact statement is required, something like that. As of last year, they can now go to our self-service tool and put in their shapefile, put in the boundary of their project area, and get all the information on what we know about that species or the species that appear in their project area. Until late last year, if you called our office and filed for a report, it would take a couple weeks and a lot of labor, a lot of clicking to get the same information, but we now have an online self-service tool, and you can get that report in about 5 minutes, sent to your email box. So that's pretty significant for us. We were able to do that because we are the state's Natural Heritage Program. We're part of the NatureServe Network. Every state in the union has an affiliate that's similar program to ours, and several other countries do as well. We use the same software. We use the same system of assessing these plants or assessing these animals as well. That way you get consistent information across state boundaries in the same kind of format when you are doing a statement. And that's also how U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service helps determine, again, if things warrant listing, things like that. So you have to have consistent collection information and consistent way we disseminate that information. Of course, just counting them isn't necessarily enough. In some cases, the populations are legitimately in decline, and we got to do something to try to increase their numbers, increase their population. And we do that through our Natural Areas and Recovery branch. We do a lot of prescribed fires. We do mechanical thinning in glades and grassland areas. We do a whole lot of herbicide. We do a whole lot of just really tedious manual hand-pulling removal, and the reason we have to do that is some of our endangered species are not very exciting. They look a whole lot like weeds, and if you don't have somebody that knows what they're looking at, you can decimate a population of what you're trying to protect. So even though it looks like a bunch of folks with garbage bags full of weeds, they have to know what they're doing, or they're defeating the purpose of their management. And we have a whole crew that does this. We do it statewide on our own state nature preserves and also some of our partnering programs that we work with. We have about 125,000 acres enrolled in one of our programs or another, which sounds like a lot of acres, but Kentucky is 25 million acres of landmass, so we have less than 0.5% of Kentucky is enrolled in one of our programs. So we got quite a few places, quite a few dots on the map, but it's a small drop in the bucket compared to what's in private hands. About 26,000 of those acres are properties that our agency owns and manages, usually specifically for a rare species or a rare community type. The other acres on that list are owned by other agencies that we work with for the same kind of reasons. State Fish and Wildlife, WMAs, state forests, state parks. We work with a wide variety of entities to try to protect a little bit of what's left of Kentucky, what's still in good shape. A significant reason we're able to do that is the Heritage Land Conservation Fund program that we also administer. We always talk about our nature's license plates. That's a way any citizen can contribute to this fund. We use this fund to help do a lot of this management. These two slides here are actually of Perryville State Park. We have entered into a new program where we're working extensively with Kentucky State Parks to help manage the open lands at Perryville. They've received NRCS funding to establish these pollinator plantings that you see here, these wildflowers, and we're going to kind of take over from there and continue to do prescribed fire, things like that to help boost these pollinator plantings. The reason for that is the monarch butterfly that you see in the left-hand corner. We don't want to see that listed. As you might know, monarch butterflies populations were once very common. They're in sharp decline. There's a pretty good chance they could be listed. The only way we can get those delisted is recovery. And a big part of recovery, as opposed to just counting them, because we know where they are and we know they're declining, a big part of recovery is having populations on permanently conserved property. And that is the reason that we do some of these projects that we do, is it's not just enough to boost their population. The population has to be boosted in a place that's secure, like a state nature preserve or a state park or something like that, a place where we can count on that population being there for quite a while. State parks are a great example of a place that not only can be a really special place as far as endangered species or a really special habitat type, but it's pretty. People like going there. People like looking at it. So a big part of what we do, in addition to habitat management, is also outdoor recreation. Any place we have on that map, any of those dots that are compatible for where we can protect the habitat and we can boost the native species population, but we can also let people go out and hike around and look at it, we're all for that. We have a trail manager and a trail crew that goes throughout the state doing trail management projects to have hiking trails mostly, wildlife viewing areas, places like that. These pictures right here are from all over the state, from western Kentucky to Fayette County to Cynthiana area, but several of these pictures are also of Pine Mountain, which is probably our most significant project area for both habitat and for recreation. Some of y'all might be familiar with the Pine Mountain Trail concept. The idea of the Pine Mountain Trail is you're going to be able to start at Breaks Interstate Park, hike 120 miles, and end up at Cumberland Gap National Park, all on the top of Pine Mountain. So after about 20 years, we're around 40% of the way there. But recently, we've had some pretty significant successes. Our partners at the Kentucky Natural Lands Trust have added about 4,000 acres here in the last couple years. Just last month, we added about 2,000 acres directly across the highway, across 119 from Pine Mountain State Resort Park. So we're making some pretty good progress on the Pine Mountain Trail. But it's a kind of a community effort. Once the Pine Mountain Trail is complete or larger sections are complete, you'll go through Blanton Forest State Nature Preserve, which our agency owns. It's the largest old-growth forest in the state of Kentucky. You'll also go through Continuous State Forest that the Kentucky Division of Forestry owns. You'll go through wildlife management areas, state parks. It's going to be a little bit of a bunch of different agencies that are going to complete that trail. And almost all of it also is significant natural areas with rare species. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Now, it also was mentioned earlier that we have a new cabinet website most of y'all are familiar with. The thing we're most excited about as far as the website update is that we now have an interactive map where you can go to the cabinet website and find the locations of all these hiking spots. Every dot on this map, you click on it, it's a place you can go and you can start hiking. You can find them. That might not seem like a lot. It's kind of like what Secretary mentioned earlier is most other places, that's kind of obvious. You would say, hey, we have all these places, somebody should be able to find them. Well, it took a couple years to have this map and have these dots. And when you click on these dots, it also takes you to a separate web page that gives you complete information on how to get there, what is there, trail maps, all that kind of stuff. So we are mainly in the habitat protection business, but we want to share these places with people. It's really important that folks realize what we have and can get out and enjoy them. I'm not going to read all this to you, mainly because I don't have my glasses. But there's a lot of money spent by wildlife watchers that come to Kentucky. A lot of bird watchers, non-consumptive recreation, which means they have a place they want to just go and look at stuff. They want to go hiking, they want to look at birds, things of that nature. After the habitat is created and maintained, there's really not much infrastructure. There's very minimal maintenance compared to a lot of different kinds of activities. It's just kind of you will build it and they'll come type thing. I did notice earlier when I was looking, when he was speaking, there's a lot of overlap between bourbon tourism and bird watching, and that must mean something. I'm not sure what it means. But it's a lot of the same kind of numbers, but they're affluent, they travel, and they don't tear up anything. They just look at birds. So this is a tourism initiative, I think, that's very important. And again, the Pine Mountain Trail is hopefully going to be a big part of this going forward. We're a small agency. We have doubled in size, but we've gone from 15 to 30 statewide. So that's still not a lot of folks for what we do, so we depend on a lot of partnerships to do all of this. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Forest Service, NRCS are probably our biggest single partners, but nonprofits like Kentucky Lands Trust, Natural Lands Trust, American Battlefield Trust work with us. And then, of course, again, a lot of agencies in this cabinet. Prescribed fire, we've got more land burned this year than we've ever burned in our history because Division of Forestry helped us out quite a bit. We have several big aquatic projects that Division of Water is helping us with. So we really couldn't do much without the other folks in this agency. Finally, if you want to know a little bit more about us, I encourage y'all to follow us on Facebook. We have regular updates on events as well as just the kind of places that are open and things you can do on our properties. We also, if you go to our website, our cabinet website, we just last month won an Emmy, which was pretty cool for an environmental agency, for a special that Western Kentucky University's PBS station did on our program called Kentucky Naturally, and it is also there on our website for you to see. So thanks for giving me your time, and come out and go hiking with us.
All right, so thank you very much to all three of our speakers for the DNR section of today. We do have a few minutes if there's anyone who has any questions for this group.
Yeah, so I I think the issue there is, like you say, the problem with forestry is the long-term nature of some of it, right? And that causes issues, right? It's important. So what happens is, I think there's a lot of opportunity right now. Basically, we have an underutilized resource, okay? And the key from the standpoint of use for economic development, let's say, right, is our ability to say, okay, we've got this resource out there now. What is the best fit of industries, for example, right, that can utilize the resource that we've got right now, right, to provide the maximum value added, okay? So it would be based, in my opinion, it would be based on saying, okay, the resource that we've got out there now, the forest that we have out there now, the species we've got, and all that kind of stuff, right? What's the best fit of industries, right, to be able to utilize that, you know, in a sustainable manner, and we can generate that. We know that. We know what that amount of harvesting would be that would allow sustainability long term, right? And getting that industry mix right for that resource that we have. We've done some cursory work for SOAR in that regards, for example. But that would be one way, because that is about development of something right now, building jobs on what we have right now, right? And ensuring that we can continue to maintain, grow our forests, protect them, you know, while doing that, if that makes any sense. So, right. So one of the issues there was, can we do things in a way that we can cultivate, if you will, higher value forests for the future other than what we have? So that's exact. So in the things that would be done now, as far as the industries that would be done now, as far as what they would remove from the woods, it could be done in a way that, right, you promote more higher value development coming down the road. Okay, that would be a part of your sustainability plan. And as you do that, we've done a little bit of this for SOAR, but as you do that and you improve the forest and the stocking that's there and the value of it, right, that even gives you more benefit, right? You can use it for higher benefit. So in some instances, and surface mining ground is a good example, where you can initiate, right, the development of high quality forest there now, right? But we've also got a lot of natural stands that, by treating them right, by managing them right, you can also boost their productivity and value over time.
That's a great question.
Other questions? In the back.
To make it bourbon, it has to be oak. It doesn't specifically have to be white oak, but that's the best. Gets the most flavor, and the surface areas really responds well to the charring, and so there's some other oak that comes out. I think Missouri's a big oak supplier, and others even further out west that some smaller quantities of oak barrels come from, and they are specific, and they'll hold a little bit more specific of a taste rather than white oak. So to answer your question, long way around it, is white oak is not the only one that you can use, but it's the primary is what our primary supply is white oak. So that's why it's so very important to us to keep that as a supply chain, and the young stuff, we want to get more of it. So.
Other questions? Yes.
So the question was dealing with surface mine lands, abandoned surface mine lands, and how that all works, right, relative. So we've done a lot of work on that over the last 20, 30 years. of developing techniques where you can turn an abandoned surface mine land, or a fresh one for that matter, right, into highly productive forest situation. And so we know those techniques. We know what needs to be done. We have a nonprofit now, Green Forest Works, that's doing exactly that, that's putting together packages of reforestation for those kind of lands using new techniques that have been developed. So when I started my career back in the late 70s, 80s, we were having a severe problem of getting trees to grow on surface mine lands, right? Do the compaction, all those kind of things, right? And it's taken time, but we've worked through all that. So those land areas do represent, because we have the techniques now, do represent areas where you can certainly, establish high-value forests. And it just so happens species like white oak, right, can work very well in many of those systems. So it does provide us an opportunity. The problem with forestry is, unlike corn, you can't make a crop in 3 months, right, or 4. But yet those initiatives are going on, right, and they will bear fruit down the road. So that is very much a possibility.
I think we have time for one more question. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead. Let's give another round of applause to our speakers.